The story of World War II is often told through the battles everyone recognizes: Stalingrad, Midway, Normandy, El Alamein. But behind those famous names lies another history, a shadow history carved into classified documents, forgotten operations, sealed transmissions, and whispered decisions made in dimly lit rooms. These were the hidden events that never made it onto the newsreels, the secret maneuvers that shifted the direction of armies, toppled empires, and changed the fate of millions. To understand the true shape of the war, you have to open the files that were never meant to be seen by the public. Files buried in archives, locked in vaults, or lost to time until recently. This is the secret war, the one fought not only with guns and tanks, but with deception, espionage, sabotage, intelligence, and decisions so delicate and dangerous that even the people who carried them out rarely understood their full consequences. It begins before the world even realized a war was coming. In the early 1930s, German intelligence quietly monitored the global response to Hitler's speeches, measuring not just political reactions, but military readiness. Several intercepted reports revealed something unsettling. Most nations believed Hitler was blustering, not preparing. These early miscalculations gave Germany the confidence to expand, to build, to rearm. In hidden industrial zones, camouflaged as civilian factories, the Luftwaffe was being born long before it officially existed. The world remained blind, and that blindness formed the first secret event that changed the course of the coming conflict: the silent acceptance of Germany's rearmament. As British and French leaders debated paperwork, German factories fired up blast furnaces through the night. But Germany was not the only nation preparing in secret. In Japan, a group of naval strategists known as the Shadow Fleet Society created a hidden plan to reshape the Pacific. Long before Pearl Harbor, these officers mapped out every major American naval base, studied fuel reserves, and even timed how long it would take the United States to rebuild a battleship. Their conclusion, stamped into a confidential report: Japan could win only if it struck fast, deep, and decisively, before American industry could mobilize. This document, locked away in a vault beneath the Imperial Navy headquarters, would become the foundation of the Pearl Harbor attack plan. The world never learned of its existence until decades later, but the war was already being shaped by its predictions. While Japan studied America, America was quietly preparing its own future advantage. Years before joining the war, U.S. intelligence began Operation Sapphire, a little-known effort to break foreign diplomatic codes. This initiative would later evolve into the MAGIC program, giving the United States access to Japanese communications. But before MAGIC existed, there were a handful of cryptographers working in cramped rooms, poring over streams of numbers with pencil and paper, building the groundwork for one of the greatest intelligence successes in military history. These early breakthroughs, uncelebrated, unacknowledged, slowly opened cracks in the Japanese communication system. Through those cracks, the Americans would eventually peer into Tokyo's strategic mind. But secret breakthroughs were not limited to cryptography. In the Soviet Union, Stalin created a hidden intelligence network reaching across Europe long before the German invasion. What many still don't realize is that one of Stalin's earliest warning reports about Hitler's plans came from a German officer sympathetic to communism. This officer smuggled documents revealing the outline of Operation Barbarossa months before the attack. But Stalin dismissed them as provocations, and the report was buried. Decades later, historians uncovered these documents and realized the truth. The Soviet Union could have prepared more effectively, and millions of lives might have been saved. This buried warning, ignored and forgotten, became one of the most tragic secret events of the war. As Europe marched toward conflict, another hidden event unfolded in Britain. A team of scientists working in an underground laboratory in Essex completed an invention so astonishing that it would quietly determine the outcome of the Battle of Britain. They created the cavity magnetron, an advanced radar component that allowed radar stations to detect incoming aircraft with unparalleled accuracy. This device, kept secret even from many military commanders, was locked away inside a nondescript case and handed over to a small group of engineers with strict instructions. Its existence was so classified that Britain later offered the entire technology to the United States in exchange for industrial support. That trade, made in a private meeting between Churchill and Roosevelt's envoys, became one of the most valuable exchanges in the history of warfare. Yet technology was only one part of the hidden war. Beneath the streets of Berlin, in a dimly lit basement, a secret anti-Nazi resistance group coded messages into seemingly harmless letters and postcards. These messages traveled across Europe, eventually reaching British intelligence. The group provided detailed information about German troop movements, production schedules, and even the psychological state of high-ranking officers. Their reports helped the Allies understand cracks in the German command far earlier than previously known. But because the group remained secret for decades, their contributions to the war effort went largely unrecognized. In the Mediterranean, another invisible event took shape. British intelligence executed Operation Mincemeat, a deception so bizarre it sounded like fiction. They planted falsified invasion plans on a corpse dressed as a Royal Marine officer and allowed it to wash ashore in Spain. German intelligence retrieved the documents, fully believed the ruse, and shifted troops away from Sicily. What people rarely realize is that the success of the operation depended on dozens of unreported sub-operations, secret courier interceptions, planted rumors, forged medical reports, and even fake love letters. It was not just a single event, but a web of small hidden actions that together misled the German army and changed the trajectory of the Mediterranean campaign. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, America launched another secret effort, one that would quietly create an industrial miracle. Before Pearl Harbor, the U.S. government quietly approached major corporations with classified contracts, mandating enormous production readiness. Automobile companies, refrigerator manufacturers, and even typewriter firms were ordered to prepare blueprints for tanks, aircraft, and rifles. For years, these plans sat in sealed drawers. When the war finally came, factories converted almost overnight, stunning both allies and enemies. The Axis powers believed American production would take years to ramp up, not realizing the machinery had already been designed in secret, waiting only for the order to begin. This hidden industrial mobilization became one of the most important events of the war, yet the public knew nothing about it at the time. But perhaps the most consequential secret operation of all began in the deserts of New Mexico, where a classified scientific project grew into the most powerful force ever created by humans. The Manhattan Project operated under layers of deception, fake company names, sealed train cars, restricted towns, and scientists sworn to silence under threat of imprisonment. Inside laboratories, hidden behind barbed wire, some of the world's greatest minds worked feverishly on a weapon capable of ending the war in a single stroke. But few people know how many near disasters occurred behind the scenes. Experiments that almost destroyed entire laboratories, security breaches that nearly exposed the program, and political struggles so intense that they were kept classified for decades. Every mistake, every delay, and every breakthrough shifted the timeline of the war. These are only the earliest threads of the story. The secret war was made of thousands of hidden decisions, covert operations, underground networks, and classified technologies,
each one tipping the balance of power in ways that remained invisible until long after the war ended. And as the conflict intensified, the secret operations grew more daring, more dangerous, and more decisive.
As the war exploded across continents, the secret events grew more complex, weaving themselves into the fabric of every major battle. By 1941, intelligence had become as deadly as any weapon, and deception as powerful as any army. In London, a dimly lit basement beneath a nondescript building housed a team of codebreakers whose existence was so secret that even members of parliament were unaware of their work. This hidden facility, known internally as the Silent Room, processed intercepted German communications that had been partially decoded through early work at Bletchley Park. The Silent Room specialists focused not on breaking the codes themselves, but on analyzing patterns within the messages. Who sent them, how often, at what times, using what linguistic quirks. Through these patterns, they uncovered subtle changes in German naval operations months before U-boats launched their brutal campaigns in the Atlantic. The discoveries made in this underground chamber, never credited, never acknowledged, saved thousands of Allied sailors by allowing convoys to reroute before wolf packs struck. But the Germans, too, had their own quiet successes that never reached the history books. In 1940, a group of German engineers secretly tested an early form of night vision equipment, allowing tank crews to see in darkness through infrared scopes. Only a handful of prototypes were ever deployed, and their existence remained hidden until documents surfaced decades later. These devices, crude but revolutionary, allowed select German units to maneuver at night with unexpected precision. Their impact was limited by the small number available, but the technology hinted at a future battleground the world was not yet ready to face. Had these secret systems been produced in larger quantities, the night battles of Europe might have unfolded very differently. Far from Europe, in the Pacific, another shadow conflict played out across the vastness of the ocean. Before the attack on Pearl Harbor, a small team of Japanese spies operated in Hawaii under commercial cover, gathering information on U.S. ship movements, fuel reserves, and patrol routines. Their reports, sent in coded diplomatic messages, shaped the final version of the Pearl Harbor attack plan. What remains less known is that one of these spies later attempted to delay the attack, sensing that the Americans were not as unprepared as Tokyo believed. His warnings, however, were buried by higher-ranking officials who feared any sign of hesitation would jeopardize the plan. This ignored warning, the quiet attempt of a single man to slow the march toward war, became another hidden event with consequences felt across the globe. Meanwhile, deep in the forests of Eastern Europe, an underground network known as the Silent Cross gathered intelligence that would eventually help the Soviets understand Germany's strategic priorities. This network consisted of farmers, school teachers, and railway workers who risked execution to record train movements, troop transfers, and supply shipments. They passed this information through coded symbols carved discreetly onto wooden crates or scratched on the backs of letters disguised as routine correspondence. Few of these operatives survived the war, and their contributions remained buried until long after the final shots were fired. But their quiet sacrifices provided the Soviet command with key insights that later influenced decisions during the defense of Moscow and the counterattack at Stalingrad. As secret networks operated on the ground, another invisible struggle took place in the skies. Radio operators on both sides engaged in a constant battle of signals, jamming, intercepting, disguising, and decoding transmissions. One of the least known events occurred when an American listening post in the Philippines intercepted a transmission that revealed the movement of a major fleet group. The information was sent to Washington, but due to bureaucratic delays and communication failures, it never reached commanders in time to prevent the disaster that would soon unfold. This missed opportunity, lost in a maze of paperwork and protocol, became yet another hidden moment that shaped the war in ways few understood.
In North Africa, the secret war took on an entirely different form. British intelligence executed a covert operation known only to a handful of officers, Operation Stormcloud. They planted false documents inside abandoned vehicles, forged supply manifests, and staged misleading troop positioning maps, all designed to convince German commanders that an Allied landing was planned hundreds of miles from the real target. The ruse succeeded, redirecting German armor and weakening their defenses where the actual attack would strike. The operation remained classified for decades, overshadowed by larger battles, but in truth, it subtly shifted the momentum of the North African campaign. Meanwhile, in the United States, the government quietly created a shadow transportation network designed to move war materials across the country without drawing attention. Disguised as ordinary commercial shipments, these convoys carried aircraft parts, explosives, and specialized equipment to secret manufacturing hubs. Railway schedules were altered without public explanation, and entire trains were rerouted under cover of darkness to avoid espionage. This logistical sleight of hand allowed the U.S. military to build a strategic reserve of aircraft and ships far larger than foreign observers had estimated. When the full scale of American production finally appeared on the world stage, it shocked both allies and enemies, all because of the secrecy surrounding these hidden supply routes. Perhaps the most astonishing secret of the early war years involved a program that very nearly remained unknown to history. In early 1942, a group of American scientists created a device capable of detecting submarines through subtle variations in the Earth's magnetic field. The technology, primitive by modern standards, was so sensitive that it had to be transported in shielded containers and operated only in areas free from electrical interference. Though partially successful, the device gave the Allies rare glimpses into the positions of German U-boats and helped protect several vital convoys. But because the project was considered a potential strategic asset for future wars, all documentation was sealed for generations. As the war expanded and the pressure mounted, each nation sought increasingly desperate secret strategies. In Germany, a hidden laboratory worked on a new generation of long-range weapons, far more advanced than the V-1 and V-2 rockets. These prototypes, codenamed Project Valkyrie, were intended to strike distant cities with unprecedented precision. The program was hampered by resource shortages, internal rivalries, and Allied bombing raids, but the fact that such technology existed at all remained one of the war's most astonishing revelations. Had these weapons reached operational capacity, the strategic balance of the war might have shifted drastically. In the Pacific, U.S. Marines executed a covert program known informally as ghost listener formations. Small teams were deployed to remote islands ahead of major invasions, where they tapped into Japanese communication lines, observed troop movements, and mapped hidden supply caches. Their reports, sent through encrypted bursts of radio static, provided crucial intelligence that saved thousands of American lives during the island-hopping campaign. These teams operated with such secrecy that even many officers within the Marine Corps were unaware of their mission. And behind all of these operations, a deeper layer of secrecy, political secrecy, guided the war's most consequential decisions. Meetings between Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin often included private discussions that were never recorded in official transcripts. In these hidden conversations, they negotiated territorial boundaries, post-war governments, and strategic priorities that shaped not only the war, but the world that followed. These discussions, reconstructed from fragmented notes and personal diaries, revealed choices made in shadows that would later define global politics for decades. These were the hidden threads that ran beneath the surface of World War II, shaping battles, influencing commanders, and determining outcomes in ways the public never knew. Each secret event, each quiet operation, each whispered decision carried enormous consequences that echoed across continents. And as the war continued, The covert world only grew more intense, more daring, and more decisive.
As the conflict moved into its most brutal years, the secret war intensified into a vast network of hidden decisions and covert struggles, unfolding beneath the surface of the visible fighting. In occupied Europe, resistance movements grew bolder, but behind their heroism lay secret coordination channels that remained unknown for decades. One of the most important of these was a coded message network embedded in children's radio programs broadcast across France and Belgium. The broadcasts seemed harmless, stories, songs, and bedtime tales, yet within their words were embedded subtle cues that signaled resistance cells to initiate sabotage operations, avoid German patrols, or gather at predetermined locations. These signals were so cleverly hidden that even after the war, some analysts struggled to decode the exact method used. This covert communication system allowed disparate resistance units to act as a unified force without ever meeting or exchanging direct messages. It became one of the most effective shadow tools used to undermine German occupation across Western Europe. In the East, the Soviet Union executed a series of clandestine operations that remained classified well into the 21st century. Among the most extraordinary was Operation Snow Steppe, a massive relocation of critical factories deep into Siberia. To the public, it appeared as though production simply shifted away from the front. But in truth, the relocation involved thousands of disguised trains, false manifests, and decoy shipments designed to fool German intelligence into believing Soviet industry was collapsing. Instead, entire weapons factories, machinery, workers, engineers, and raw materials were secretly transported thousands of kilometers to new fortified industrial zones hidden among forests and mountains. This operation ensured that Soviet tank and aircraft production continued at astonishing levels, even as German armies pushed deep into Soviet territory. Without this secretly orchestrated industrial evacuation, the Soviet Union might have collapsed before the tide of war shifted. On the diplomatic front, the secret war became even more intricate. Several countries that publicly claimed neutrality quietly engaged in covert negotiations that influenced the balance of power. In one case, a neutral ambassador provided the Allies with confidential reports on Axis fuel shortages, allowing Allied commanders to predict German operations with surprising accuracy. These reports were smuggled inside diplomatic pouches that no belligerent nation dared open, granting the ambassador a level of protection that enabled him to pass information freely. His role remained hidden until the release of declassified diplomatic archives many decades later, revealing that a single diplomat had quietly shaped major Allied decisions during some of the war's most critical months. At sea, the hidden war evolved into a deadly chess game between submarine commanders and intelligence officers. The British Admiralty established a covert program known internally as EchoLab, an advanced acoustic analysis center that examined every sonar ping, torpedo impact, and underwater anomaly received from Allied ships. Analysts in EchoLab discovered subtle patterns in German submarine behavior, variations in dive speed, preferred depths, and even torpedo timing that allowed them to create predictive models of U-boat tactics. These insights, delivered through encrypted notes to convoy escorts, enabled Allied ships to avoid ambushes before they happened. EchoLab's existence remained confidential long after the war ended, overshadowed by more famous intelligence operations, yet its impact on the Battle of the Atlantic was immense. Meanwhile, in Japan, a series of secret internal struggles unfolded within the Imperial Navy and Army. High-ranking officers debated clandestinely whether the war was winnable,
and several attempted to send anonymous warnings to Tokyo's leadership urging strategic withdrawal. One particularly remarkable incident involved a senior naval strategist who compiled a classified report detailing the catastrophic consequences of continuing the war against the United States. This report, sealed and hidden by political rivals, predicted with chilling accuracy the eventual collapse of Japan's industrial capacity, fuel reserves, and defensive perimeter. When historians discovered the document decades later, they were stunned to find that many of its predictions aligned almost perfectly with the events that would later unfold. Had the report reached the emperor or key decision-makers, the Pacific War might have taken a drastically different path. In the United States, the secret war expanded into a world of experimental technologies and clandestine training programs. One such program involved the creation of an elite unit trained to infiltrate enemy-held islands, gather intelligence, and sabotage infrastructure ahead of major landings. These teams operated primarily at night, using specially designed equipment that allowed them to blend into dense jungles and rocky coastlines. Their operations were so secret that even after the war, many mission reports remained sealed, and the soldiers who participated were forbidden to discuss their activities. Some of their actions directly contributed to the success of major campaigns, such as the liberation of the Philippines and the capture of key Pacific strongholds. Another secret American project involved psychological operations designed to undermine enemy morale. A little-known unit produced counterfeit Japanese newspapers filled with fabricated stories about food shortages, internal rebellions, and political dissent. These papers were dropped over remote regions or smuggled into coastal towns by submarines. While their direct effect is difficult to measure, intercepted Japanese communications later revealed that some units did indeed believe the false reports, leading to confusion and lowered morale. This covert manipulation effort remained hidden within classified archives for decades, overshadowed by larger operations, but nonetheless an important example of the psychological dimensions of the secret war. As the conflict raged on, the secret competition emerged among Allied intelligence agencies themselves. British, American, and Soviet operatives each sought access to captured enemy documents, high-ranking defectors, and advanced technologies. This race for intelligence occasionally led to hidden conflicts between the Allies, with each nation attempting to secure advantages that would influence the post-war world. In one particularly striking example, Soviet agents infiltrated a German research facility just days before American forces arrived, extracting crucial documents and transporting them east before the Americans could seize the material. This covert rivalry shaped the development of post-war military technology and contributed to the tensions that would soon define the emerging Cold War. But even as these hidden operations unfolded across the globe, some of the most consequential secret events happened far from any battlefield. In secluded meeting rooms in Washington, London, and Moscow, leaders discussed plans that would redraw national borders, carve new nations into existence, and reshape global influence for decades. These conversations were deliberately excluded from official records, their details preserved only in personal journals or private correspondence. In these guarded discussions, the seeds of future conflicts and allies were quietly planted. Decisions about occupied territories, economic reconstruction, and political influence were made in whispers, shaping a world order that millions would live under without ever knowing how the decisions had been made. But the secret war was not defined solely by governments and intelligence agencies. Ordinary people, farmers, school children, factory workers, shopkeepers, played roles in hidden events that influenced the larger conflict. In some villages, residents disguised Allied pilots who had been shot down, hiding them in basements and smuggling them across borders under cover of night. In cities under occupation, workers intentionally sabotaged machinery, introduced flaws into aircraft components, or miscalibrated weapons bound for the front. Each act of resistance, no matter how small, added up to a vast, uncoordinated but powerful shadow campaign that undermined Axis efforts from within. These countless acts of quiet defiance remained largely undocumented, yet together they formed one of the most significant hidden forces of the entire war. As the world around them erupted in visible violence, millions of people fought in a silent struggle that left few traces. Their courage, their sacrifices, and their hidden battles formed the backbone of the secret war that shaped the outcome of World War II just as surely as any tank or aircraft.
As the war pressed deeper into its most destructive phase, the shadow conflict expanded into areas that would remain hidden from public knowledge for generations. One of the most intriguing and least understood parts of this hidden world involved the rapid evolution of covert scientific research. Projects so sensitive, they were conducted under layers of secrecy that effectively erased their existence. In Germany, a clandestine group of physicists and engineers attempted to pioneer technologies that, had they succeeded, might have prolonged the war dramatically. Among these was an early attempt to create a radar-disrupting device capable of scrambling Allied navigation signals. The project, nicknamed Night Spire, never reached full operational status, but its partial development forced Allied intelligence to reevaluate their own technological vulnerabilities. Documents later revealed that British and American research into more robust radar systems accelerated in direct response to intercepted whispers about Night Spire's progress. Thus, a German project that never fully materialized still shaped the war's technological landscape in invisible ways. Meanwhile, on the Allied side, covert research took on a staggering breadth. Beyond the Manhattan Project, which overshadowed nearly all wartime scientific work, there were dozens of subsidiary programs designed to solve lesser-known but equally pressing strategic challenges. One such effort focused on developing a synthetic fuel capable of powering aircraft even when traditional gasoline supplies ran dangerously low. The project operated in a sealed laboratory complex disguised as a food processing facility on the American East Coast. Only a handful of military officials knew the true nature of the research performed within its walls. While the final product was never needed due to the U.S.'s overwhelming access to natural fuel reserves, the technology proved vital in the post-war years and influenced aviation development for decades. Few historians realize that this quiet scientific race unfolded behind locked doors while the world focused on battles thousands of miles away. In the shadows of the intelligence world, another powerful shift occurred as Allied cryptographers made breakthroughs that allowed them to read encrypted Axis communications with unprecedented clarity. Yet even this visible success had hidden roots. Some of the most important insights came not from mathematicians, but from psychological analysts who studied the writing habits, emotional cues, and personal idiosyncrasies of enemy radio operators. These analysts identified recurring linguistic patterns, subtle quirks in phrasing, repeated errors, and habitual greetings that provided crucial hints about which operators were transmitting and what code variations they favored. This psychological angle on cryptography remained classified long after the war and was overshadowed by the glamour of mechanical code-breaking machines. Nevertheless, it quietly enabled several major Allied victories by allowing commanders to understand not just the content of enemy transmissions, but the personalities and decision-making styles behind them. At the same time, covert sabotage operations reached new heights across occupied Europe. Underground engineers devised improvised explosives disguised as common household objects, a bar of soap, a tin of biscuits, a thermos flask, that resistance fighters smuggled into factories producing weapons for the German military. These devices were often timed to detonate hours after being placed, ensuring that sabotage could not be easily traced to those who carried it out. German commands struggled to understand why production targets were consistently missed despite increased security measures. Only years later, when classified Allied records were released, did the full extent of the sabotage program become clear. It was not a series of isolated incidents, but a coordinated transnational web of resistance that quietly eroded the industrial backbone of the German war machine. In Asia, the hidden events took on a very different character. Japanese military intelligence was deeply entrenched in China, where they operated a vast network of informants embedded in villages, railways, and government offices. But the Chinese resistance, aided by Soviet and later American operatives, managed to infiltrate the Japanese intelligence system itself. In one of the least-known operations of the war, a high-ranking Japanese intelligence officer was secretly turned by Chinese agents. For nearly 2 years, he fed false information to Tokyo while passing genuine intelligence to the resistance. His reports shaped Japanese strategies in several campaigns, subtly misdirecting troop movements, supply distribution, and air support. To this day, his identity remains sealed, known only through a code name preserved in partially declassified Chinese dossiers. His quiet betrayal of the Japanese command shortened several brutal campaigns and saved countless civilian lives. Yet almost no one outside intelligence circles has ever heard of him.
Even more remarkable was the secret cooperation between various Allied intelligence agencies operating in Asia. Despite deep political mistrust, American, British, Chinese, and local resistance groups shared intelligence through hidden routes that bypassed traditional diplomatic channels. These routes included encrypted messages disguised as shipping invoices, intelligence packets concealed inside silk clothing, and microfilm strips sewn into the linings of courier bags. One of the most daring aspects of this collaboration involved the use of indigenous navigators who guided Allied operatives through terrain so remote that no map could adequately describe it. These navigators, whose knowledge of mountains, jungles, and river networks proved invaluable, rarely received recognition for their contributions. Yet without them, many of the most successful Allied operations in Southeast Asia would have been impossible. As the war continued, the psychological dimension of the secret conflict deepened. Both Axis and Allied powers engaged in information warfare, spreading rumors designed to erode morale and distort perceptions. One of the most effective Allied psychological operations involved broadcasting fabricated radio programs that mimicked genuine German channels. These broadcasts, transmitted from secret locations and voiced by fluent German-speaking actors, spread misinformation designed to sow confusion among soldiers and civilians alike. They introduced false reports of internal dissent, exaggerated casualty figures, and even fictitious military orders that caused German units to hesitate or reposition themselves unnecessarily. Because these broadcasts blended so seamlessly with real German communications, their impact remained hidden for decades, revealed only when former German officers recounted moments of unexplained confusion on the battlefield. Meanwhile, in the industrial heartlands of the Axis nations, another invisible struggle unfolded. Allied bombing campaigns targeted key factories and supply lines, but their success depended heavily on secret reconnaissance missions conducted by specialized aircraft equipped with advanced cameras capable of capturing detailed images from high altitudes. The true power of these reconnaissance flights came not only from the photographs themselves, but from the analysts who spent countless hours studying them. These analysts, working in secure facilities, developed techniques to identify even the smallest irregularities, shadows cast at odd angles, changes in vegetation, subtle variations in factory roof color that suggested hidden bunkers or underground facilities. This painstaking work enabled the Allies to strike strategic targets with increasing precision, gradually crippling the Axis industrial capacity. The role of these photographic analysts remained one of the war's most deeply concealed contributions until long after the conflict ended. But as the war approached its climax, the secret operations grew even more ambitious. Allied intelligence discovered that several Axis leaders were preparing escape routes should the war turn against them. In response, covert teams were deployed to track these escape plans, intercept key figures, and ensure that war criminals could not evade justice. These teams operated in absolute secrecy, often without direct communication with higher command. They infiltrated remote mountain passes, monitored ports under cover of night, and planted informants within enemy ranks. Many of their missions succeeded quietly, preventing high-ranking officials from fleeing to neutral countries. Others resulted in narrow escapes or close calls that remained classified for decades. The clandestine pursuit of these figures formed one of the most intense and unrecorded chapters of the secret war. Through all these hidden events, a pattern emerged. The visible battles that captured headlines and shaped public memory were only the surface layer of a far more intricate, concealed struggle. Every decision, every breakthrough, every moment of hesitation or insight within the secret war subtly reshaped the course of the conflict. This shadow world, vast and complex, remained largely hidden from view, yet it was here, in the coded messages, covert meetings, disguised laboratories, and whispered betrayals, that much of World War II's fate was decided.
And so the war moved deeper into its hidden layers, into the operations that never made it into newspapers, the missions that remained sealed in vaults for decades, the decisions made in silent rooms that would change the entire direction of World War II before a single shot was fired in the open. Among these was the cryptic series of operations the Allies codenamed Phantom Vector, a coordinated effort among intelligence services to create entirely fictional army groups, false air forces, and decoy fleets to confuse Axis planners. Not a single soldier in Phantom Vector ever existed. Not one tank rolled on its behalf. Yet Germany diverted thousands of men, hundreds of aircraft, and entire divisions to counter a phantom threat created entirely by Allied deception artists. The mastermind behind the project, a mild-mannered stage magician named Jasper Maskelyne, crafted illusions so convincing that German reconnaissance interpreted inflatable tanks as real armored brigades, wooden aircraft as operational squadrons, and cleverly constructed fake ports as major naval bases preparing for invasion. These illusions forced the Axis High Command to scatter its forces, weakening its defensive lines in ways that historians still marvel at today. But parallel to these deceptions was another operation so deeply buried in secrecy that even many Allied commanders were unaware of its existence. It involved the construction of two vast floating harbors, mulberries, that would make the Normandy landings possible. Long before D-Day, engineers worked in hidden coastal workshops to design artificial ports the size of entire cities. These massive steel and concrete structures were assembled in pieces, disguised as ordinary ship components, and towed under the cover of darkness across the English Channel. Their existence was denied, their purpose classified, and their scale unimaginable. Yet without them, the Allies could not have supplied the invasion force. The entire plan for liberating France depended on harbors no one was allowed to acknowledge. The success of the greatest amphibious assault in history rested on floating cities that had never existed before.
Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, a secret project was unfolding in remote deserts, laboratories, and hidden factories, one that would change the nature of warfare forever. The Manhattan Project, cloaked in layers of security, became the most ambitious scientific endeavor ever undertaken. Thousands of scientists worked in compartmentalized units, each unaware of the full purpose of their labor. Entire towns were built in secret, guarded by armed patrols, erased from maps, and filled with workers who operated under strict instructions never to speak of what they were doing. These towns processed uranium, developed new materials, and tested theories that bordered on the impossible. When detonations shook the desert during early tests, soldiers stationed nearby were told they had witnessed accidental ammunition explosions. For months, rumors spread across the country about mysterious bursts of light seen in remote areas, rumors that were swiftly silenced. It would not be until the final months of the war that the world would learn the true nature of what had been built in secret. But while scientists worked in hidden laboratories, a smaller, more covert group of operatives worked behind enemy lines. The British Special Operations Executive and the American OSS deployed agents into occupied Europe to sabotage German supply lines, rescue downed pilots, and coordinate with resistance fighters. Some of these operatives were not soldiers, but ordinary citizens who volunteered for missions with almost no chance of survival. One of the most remarkable was the work of a young Polish courier named Jan Karski, who infiltrated heavily fortified borders to deliver intelligence that would directly influence Allied strategy. His reports on German troop movements, ammunition shortages, and industrial bottlenecks were among the most accurate intelligence documents of the entire war. Yet Karski himself remained unknown to the public for decades, his contributions buried beneath layers of classified archives. Among the darkest of the hidden operations were the early warnings intercepted through Ultra about Germany's plans for the V weapons program. Long before rockets fell on London, Allied codebreakers at Bletchley Park discovered cryptic references to special weapons in German communications. Analysts pieced together fragments of intelligence until they realized Germany was developing advanced missiles capable of striking cities from hundreds of miles away. The Allies launched a series of secret bombing raids against the Peenemünde research site, sending specially trained pilots into heavily defended territory to destroy laboratories, assembly halls, and launch pads before they could become fully operational. These missions were incredibly dangerous and relied on precise navigation in total darkness. Hundreds of airmen died without ever knowing the true strategic importance of their sacrifice. Their mission slowed Germany's missile development by months that prevented the V2 campaign from becoming even deadlier. But the war's hidden files extended far beyond battlefields and laboratories. In neutral Switzerland, a secret economic battle was underway. Allied agents disguised as businessmen, bankers, and diplomats began infiltrating financial networks used by the Axis to trade gold, raw materials, and foreign currency. Through coded telegrams, covert meetings, and intercepted banking records, they uncovered vast amounts of wartime funding routed through neutral nations. The Allies then used these discoveries to freeze accounts, block transactions, and cripple the Axis war economy without firing a single shot. Some of the most important victories of the war were won not with bullets, but with bank ledgers and intercepted financial cables. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, a secret U.S. program known as Black Cat Operations deployed long-range PBY Catalina aircraft painted entirely in matte black. These planes flew low over the ocean at night, guided only by moonlight and intuition to intercept Japanese convoys, mark targets for submarines, and conduct reconnaissance missions so risky that even seasoned combat pilots refused to attempt them. The Black Cats operated in near silence, dodging flak and fighters, gathering intelligence that gave the U.S. Navy a decisive advantage in the Pacific theater. Their missions were so secret that even other American units often had no idea who the Black Cats were or where they came from.
Yet perhaps the most astonishing secret of all was Operation Safe Haven, a post-war intelligence program designed to track down stolen wealth the Nazis had hidden across Europe and the Middle East. As the war drew to a close, Allied agents began uncovering evidence of vast hoards of gold, artwork, currency, and stolen property concealed in secret vaults, abandoned mines, and even underwater locations. This discovery triggered one of the largest treasure hunts in history, involving intelligence officers, divers, code breakers, and military police working across multiple continents. The operation revealed not only the financial underpinnings of the Nazi regime, but also the networks used to smuggle assets to sympathetic governments. Many of these discoveries remained classified for decades, and even today, historians believe much of the stolen wealth remains undiscovered. And while spies, scientists, and saboteurs shaped the hidden war on land, another secret front unfolded beneath the waves. The Allies deployed advanced sonar systems, underwater listening posts, and code-breaking submarines to hunt German U-boats. One of the most closely guarded secrets involved captured Enigma machines recovered from sinking submarines. These captures were not accidental. They were the result of dangerous covert boarding actions carried out in violent seas. Sailors risked drowning, hypothermia, and enemy gunfire to retrieve code books and cipher devices from flooding compartments. Many died in the process, their missions classified so thoroughly that their families would never learn the true circumstances of their deaths. In the Far East, the Chinese resistance fought a hidden war that remained largely unknown to the Western public. Operatives spirited Allied pilots from crash sites to safe houses deep within mountain villages. They built intricate networks of secret routes that crossed rivers, farmland, and enemy patrol lines. These networks allowed downed bomber crews to escape Japanese capture and return to fight again. Intelligence gathered by Chinese operatives revealed Japanese troop deployments, supply shipments, and fortification plans, information that proved vital during major American offensives. Yet the bravery of these resistance fighters remained hidden, overshadowed by larger campaigns and post-war political tensions. Across the world, the war was filled with these secrets. Operations sealed in classified archives, missions carried out in silence, discoveries kept hidden from the public for decades. Together, they formed the invisible backbone of Allied victory. They shaped the outcome of battles, redirected strategic decisions, and influenced the fate of entire nations. They remind us that the greatest turning points of World War II were not always found on beaches, in trenches, or in the skies above burning cities. Many were hidden behind locked doors, inside encrypted messages, beneath the ocean, in the shadows of occupied territories, or in the minds of scientists working under the weight of unimaginable pressure. These were the secret war files, hidden events that changed the course of World War II long before the world ever knew they existed.